Hello, hello, hello. This is a day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. I'm Dr. Dana Carson. Sorry, getting my my technology together here. Uh, I'm so excited to have you with us here on Relevant Pulpits. Man, I'm burning on the inside to chop it up publicly with one of my good friends here in my city that I often have a chance to talk to, and we run things by each other, and we're going to have a great time together to you with you talking about church business. You know what we're going to do with this business called church, and what is our role right now? What are we going to do? What things going to look like? I mean, we're going to talk greatly. But before I introduce him and bring him on, I want you to remember some of our protocols that helps us to stay on the air doing the things that we do. You know, we have a staff behind the scenes taking care of all of this, and so your financial support is extremely important and necessary for us to continue to do the things that we do. So please don't forget, as the Spirit of God or common sense leads you to support this platform, you can give on my website, drdanacarson.org, or you can give by way of Cash App. But we want you to give no matter what size, small, large. Please support this and help us be able to continue to bring you 7 days a week of ministry through Dana Carson Kingdom Ministries. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. We want you also to be a kingdom advocate. We want you to make sure that you text, you tag, and you share this link with someone so that they can come in and hear uh, us discuss church business. I guarantee you, people are going to be blessed today. Um, this is just a continuation and a perpetuation of conversation that me and my brother we have quite often, and I know that you're going to glean some tremendous nuggets from this conversation. But also, unlike a lot of platforms, we give you also the opportunity to send in your live questions. I have a staff behind the scenes, and they're going to be cataloging your questions as they come in. And then there'll be a time that uh, uh, Pastor Remus Wright and I will answer those questions. So I'm so excited about what God is doing and what God is saying. And today's guest is a very, very prominent preacher in the city of Houston and our world, who's doing some incredible things around the world in the name of Christ. Um, he's not a novice to Christianity. He's not a novice to the church world, and has actually built one of the largest ministries here in the city of Houston, Texas. And Houston, Texas has large ministries, and his is one of the largest. And so he has built buildings, community projects, and programs. He's acquired property and land in order to make a difference in the community in which he serves as pastor and beyond. It does international work. He and his wife, they are an incredible team as well. And she hosts uh, a conference that the women go crazy for every year. And man, they're just doing some incredible things. While he doesn't need much of an introduction, he's an academician, well studied, well lettered. He has an MDiv from Southwestern Theological Seminary and biblical studies, biblical languages, excuse me. And he's sharp. He's sharp, cream of the crop. Represents what leadership should and will look like in the 21st century. He's a dear friend of mine. He's someone that I will call and talk to, and love him with all my heart. And so it brings me great joy and delight to bring to Relevant Pulpits today. I want to call him Bishop, Doctor, Pastor Remus Wright. Come on in, my brother.
God bless you, Dr. Carson. How you doing, brother?
Oh man, I'm doing so well, man. So
Good,
well.
man.
I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to share with you. You know, people not too long ago, the whole world was inside your church and
Right.
uh, watching you do an immaculate, uh, very appropriate and very difficult job of managing one of the most historic funerals in our time, for sure, that of George Floyd. And man, on behalf of the church world, as many that will allow me to represent their sentiments, we want to tell you, my brother, thank you for hosting that funeral, managing it, and representing the kingdom of God with class, man. Thank you, bro.
Oh, brother, thank you. Thank you. You know, it was a mammoth undertaking, but thank God that, I've got great help, great people that are professional, that have the spirit of excellence. And I think one of the greatest things about the George Floyd funeral was not only the fact that there was so many different emotions all over the place that ranged from despair to wrath, anger, um, all of those things. Also, doing that in the middle, right smack dab in the middle of a pandemic, made it very, very difficult. And then having to try to corral and to control 25, 30, 40,000 people, with over 100 media outlets on the campus, having to do that and yet being able to do that without any disturbance. But there's one thing I wanted to share with you that most people don't know. With all the compliments, and we certainly appreciate all the compliments that we received from that, what people don't know is the night before the viewing of the body, which was on a Monday, I had intercessors and prayer warriors from all over this city to come to the church that night, pray, anoint, sanctify every single pew, to once again take authority over the fact this was God's house. And then after the viewing that night, before the funeral the next day, they came back in again that very same night and prayed, God's power and presence over the house. And I really believe that primarily that's the reason that everything came off well.
Well, man, in our vernacular, you did that.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you.
So
Thank
yeah, and well, uh, Doc, we always talking, but we are pastoring and leading in some incredible times.
True.
This is a disruption, and it's a global disruption, and it's not a minor disruption. Our way of living, our way of thinking, our way of interacting has been disrupted. Things that we are accustomed to doing, just like shaking hands or giving hugs. I mean, things have been changed down to the minute level. And this disruption has called for a new normal. And so, we're creatures of habit and we have very difficult time changing. And change is very difficult because if change was not difficult, we would have much more success uh, in life from both an individual and a corporate level. But it's hard to change because of structural inertia. We have sacred cows that we swear to, so most people don't change. They just they try to change, they try to make sure everything adjusts to them. But now, man, we've been put in a position where we've got to change. Jesus talked about how difficult change was when he said you can't put new oil
in old wineskins.
in. And now, Doc, we got to change. We got to change the way we eat. We got to change the way we entertain, fellowship, interact. And so this is a disruptive time. And who would have ever thought that the Christian church in America would not meet for 7 months?
7 months.
12-month year. Yeah. Going on 7 months and then still survive. So let's start off, talking about I'd like to know, what do you feel about this disruption, the changes that this pandemic, not only the pandemic of COVID-19, we have the pandemic of social injustice, and the church. So Pastor, what's your sentiments on that?
Well, I think, Dr. Carson, when we think about the principle of change, that principle is a principle that's been existent since the beginning of the Bible. I often illustrate to my members that shifts and transitions are the very natural and necessary part of life. What God used to bring Israel out of Egypt was not the same thing that he used to take them into promise.
That's
when
right.
Israel came out of Egypt, it was Moses and a rod that parted the Red Sea. When they went into promise, it was Joshua and an ark. When the feet of the priests touched the water, the Jordan was driven back. When Moses stretched out his rod, the water was driven back. So God changes his methodology. That doesn't mean he changed his mind. So many of us as Christians are so caught up on the scripture and misinterpret it when it says Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. We think that means that what's normal or what was normal then should be normal now. But that's not the way it happens.
That's right.
Effectively, when I look at Jesus and the Beatitudes in the 6th chapter of St. Matthew, to me it says now he's talking about something that was totally different from what the Jewish rabbis had taught. That's the reason he said, it has been said of old to you, but I now say unto you. I illustrate that because I think that that's the way we have to see what's happening in our modern church culture.
Yeah.
If we do not allow ourselves to become more innovative, more forward thinking, and more visionary in our approach to ministry, we will be left. There's the only difference between right now. Well, let me say it this way. We are at a place right now, we're on the precipice of either becoming dynamic or a dinosaur. Mm-hmm. One of the two. One of the two. Either we will be, as the churches in England right now, beautiful edifices that when you walk inside, nobody's there. They're just museums. Mm-hmm. Or either we will be the kind of church that turns the world upside down. And I think that the important thing for us to notice is that we're dealing with 4 layers of people. Actually 5, but the ones that I like to emphasize are the baby boomers, the millennials, the Generation X's, and the Generation Z's. All of them are thrust into one building and told, okay, now let's minister to their needs. What COVID-19 has done, what social unrest has done, it has caused the church to rethink the way that we do ministry. Mm-hmm. And so right now, our biggest concern is keeping our people together, praying that we can meet the spiritual and family needs of our congregants, and then also how can we thrust ourselves into the community and still maintain a sense of value.
That's right. That's right. Doc, in 90, I think it was 90, 93, 94, I was writing the dissertation at Boston University. And my studies showed, I think it was 1947, it said that we hadn't changed our worship paradigms from 1947. Then 1963, they had a little innovation, but it was it was the same way. We were doing things the same exact way. And I like what you said. God changes his methods, but he doesn't change his mind.
Right.
And, uh, and so, when we look then at the immutability of God, and he doesn't change, but he says in Isaiah 40, behold, I do a new thing. Will you not know it? It'll spring forth. And so I think that this is the day now for church leaders to create another uh, model of leadership, innovative leadership for the church. Now, the world already has that, but we have to create now innovative leaders. And normally, our leaders traditionally protect the sacred cows of traditionalism, but now traditionalism is being it's being disrupted,
That's right.
and we've got to not rely on the God that brought us, as you eloquently put it, across the Red Sea from with Moses and the rod, nor the God who brought us through the Jordan with Joshua and the ark and the foot of the priest. We now have to look, according to Isaiah. God says, for a road in the wilderness and a drink in the desert, unlikely places, which means I believe that the church now has to become totally dependent on the revelation or illumination of God to direct our paths. And but in order to do that, we've got to open up. Every good and perfect gift comes from above, but we got to be open. I believe God wants to inform and enlighten the preacher during this time. And this it's that kind of innovation that's going to take us now into the 21st century. Man, listen, how much this was supposed to be a grand slam year, 2020. you, you know, everybody was go cast vision this year. Isn't it something, man? The year of vision, God changes all of our vision. He
You
changes
know,
our vision.
that's absolutely true. And the interesting thing about it is, I see this as, while a very difficult time, it's an exciting time, because now our true spiritual gifts should come to the forefront. Our true spiritual gifts should come to the forefront now, in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, in terms of connectivity. They should come to the forefront. The Bible talks about having the things of the world, using them, not abusing them. And so, in other words, it's saying that the training, the teaching that we have gotten from the world, we can apply that to ministry, because God uses us where he finds us.
That's
And
right.
so, as a result of that, I mean, I look at you and what God has blessed you to do in terms of your scholastic thrust and reach. He has done that for a reason. And the reason is that you can bring those giftings, those talents, those abilities back to the church, and you can use them in such a way that people in the church are edified and uplifted and are built up as a result of what God has done for you. And so I see this time as a time of innovation, and a time where we should be excited. I mean, I'm just like you. I stood up on watch night at the end of 2019, and like everybody else, I said, 2020, God's paying double for your trouble. There's double blessings coming. There's double miracles. Okay, yes, that's right. But God didn't tell us to get to the double. We had to go through the jungle.
That's right.
But you know what? The jungle is nothing new to us. It's not unfamiliar. What we've done, Dr. Carson, in many regards, we've allowed the world's perception of what's happening through COVID-19, through mass incarceration, through social injustice, through economic downsize, economic down times. We've
Gotcha.
allowed that to infiltrate our spirit man. And now we're talking the same way the world talks. We've got to believe on the other side of this. Remember in Jeremiah where God told him in the, we quote 29:11 all the time, but I tell all the people to read back 3 verses prior to that. God tells Israel through Jeremiah, build houses and live in them. Said, get married, have children, let your children have children. Basically what God was saying, you're going to be here for a while. You're going to be here for at least 40 years. For 70 years, I'm sorry. You're going to be here for a while. So I want you to get ingrained in where you are and know that where you are, I'm going to prosper you where you are. Because after I prosper you where you are, I'm going to perform my good word upon you. So that the place that you are now, I'm going to bring you out of that. Because I know the thoughts that I think toward you. And, I think that that's what he's saying to us now. People like yourself and myself, we have to look at where we are. Tell our people we're quarantined, we're socially distant, but we still got to speak words of hope, words of healing, words of help, words of encouragement, because we're not going to be here forever.
That's right.
We're not going to be here forever. God is doing great things. Our trumpet has to have a certain sound that people understand.
That's right, Pastor, because when we look at this time of disruption, we know God is definitely still in control. And this too eventually will pass. But when it passes, we will not be the same. Our world will not be the same. Our economics and nothing will be the same. But we will come out better. And even in the midst of this disruption, God is still saying, go ye therefore in all the world and make disciples. He hasn't paused with the Great Commission. And so when we talk about coming out greater and we talk about innovation, man, when we look at the Great Commission and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached around the world as a witness, and then shall the end come. When we look at the scriptures and then we look at innovation and our now common use of technology and social media platforms and digital platforms, we now have another tool to help us to become more effective in a more affordable way to impact the world with the gospel through through technology. So I believe that when we come back out of this disruption, we are finally, the church is going to be more globally minded. Now, and I'm not trying to throw off, but we've said stuff like missionary so and so church, and nobody has left the block. And we say this is missionary so and so, and she ain't never been on a plane before. And so, we have traditionally and historically reduced missions down to a title and a tag. But when God tells us to take the gospel around the world, he means it. And man, in this disruption, God has given us a way to take the gospel around the world. And when we come back, we're going to have to now redefine our congregations. Our congregation is no longer those who are simply sitting in the seats. And so we have to creatively and innovatively create ministry opportunities that have kinesthetic effects and impacts on people that are experiencing us virtually. And we then have to define our pastorate differently, because we now got to pastor people online and on campus. And Pastor, I believe, and then I want to hear your words on this. I believe that a lot of pastors are going to be surprised that when the word is given that you can come back to church, I don't believe the church is going to have as many people as it had sitting in the seats immediately. I believe over time we'll get people will become more comfortable and return, because people still are afraid and they're going to be uncomfortable. And so even when we come back, we've got to not lose our appeal to our virtual audience. What's your thoughts on that?
I believe that even when we come back, and Dr. Carson, I like the way that you put that. I think that that was well put, well put. I think that when we come back, certainly we're not going to have the audiences we had initially. I don't know whether or not we'll ever have them. And I'll say it for this reason, because after 7 months of this new norm and people being able to get the word over digital platforms, people being able to get prayer over digital platforms, people being able to give over digital platforms, I think that when we come out of this, a lot of people will be like the country church, first and third or second and fourth. A lot of them will do it that way. And a lot of people will ignore that altogether. But you said something earlier that really sparked a concern for me. And that is when you talked about the mission mindedness. Now, certainly I can say this, and it's not to be braggadocious concerning yourself or me, but we've always been mission minded. You know, you do a lot of churches you partner with and pastor in Africa. I do a lot in Brazil and Colombia and Zimbabwe. We've always seen that as part of what our mandate from God has been, to go into the world and preach the gospel to every creature. We don't do it to be seen. We do it because that's what God said to do. And I think that those are some of the churches that I spoke about earlier that will become dinosaurs. The ones that do not understand the militant call of preaching this gospel everywhere. Think about this. Now that the church is virtual, and now that computers have made the world flat, I remember back coming up in the Baptist church with the Baptist Church Covenant, in the 5th paragraph of that, as it concludes, it says that if you relocate somewhere else for any reason, that you'll find another church that's like the church that you came out of, so that you can continue to get that word. Well, now the church is virtual. It's not in the community that I go to. Now we're talking about worldwide. So on any given Sunday, if I move from Houston, let's say to LA, my church may still be in Kansas, or my church may be in Chicago, or my church may be in Indiana, you know, because all of these people that are gathering together in terms of people that are viewing or watching are in different places now. So when we talk about a local church now, how do we define local? Because a local church is not just the building that you're in on Sundays or that I'm in on Sundays. It's where people find the word of God being preached, praise and worship going forth, prayers being prayed, and people having some kind of fellowship. It may not be physical fellowship, but it's fellowship nonetheless. We have to understand our responsibility toward making sure our people are still getting a quality word, quality worship, quality connection. And I think that that's where a challenge is being placed upon our churches. So for pastors that have been accustomed, to feeding off the energy of these buildings being full, you don't have that anymore. That's not going to be, and we don't know if we'll ever have that anymore. Because some people feel like, listen, I got up late. It's more convenient for me to watch it and give online than it is for me to go to the building. Do we miss that? Yes, we miss the fellowship. Yes, we miss being able to press flesh. But the truth of the matter is, with people coming out of this pandemic, there's going to be a certain fears for them to be in that climate again. And even after those fears have been assuaged, there's still going to be people that say, well, you know what? I'm not going to the building this week, but I'm certainly going to bring the building to me.
Yeah. And we're going to have to become comfortable and innovative enough to be able to pastor people from home and church building, and that's okay. we're going to have to, but our whole ministries up until now has been, you need to get in the church building, and and all of our methodologies were designed to bring people in the church building, but it's so limiting to have a theology that simply says bring people into the church building, because now you have people in different states and different countries calling you pastor. They're eating off of your menu, and they are affiliating with you, and if you say come into the building or you're second class Christian, now this is offensive, and also it's somewhat demeans the virtual experience.
Right.
And so, now one of the things here, Pastor, that our challenge is now, though, when we talk about uh, using virtual technology and the transition, it's the young people, it's our youth and children, because during this time, many of us have transitioned to online technology, and I know we've been using this before COVID even existed, uh, but now the intentionality, we've got to become more intentional of reaching the young people, because we are reaching the older generation, those other probably top two tiers that you talked about. We may, we, the boomers, the Xers, and maybe some of the millenniums, some of them, uh, but what about, that Z, and what about those younger people? What are we doing to connect them? Because right now, our younger generation is being totally ignored, because our broadcast or our stream networks tend to just focus, especially from the Black community side, on on the adults. Now, I know we do youth events, and we do children worship. We praise and worship, all of that. We do that, uh, and I'm pretty sure you guys have something that you're doing targeting youth and children. But Pastor, I think that uh, if we don't watch it, Satan is very cunning. We might be keeping a generation that's passing and losing a generation that's coming.
Good point. Good point. You know what, Dr. Carson? In all truthfulness, we have not been fair in our ministerial methods of reaching the various layers of people. And that's the reason why I mentioned the baby boomers, the millennials, the Generation Xers, the Generation Zers. I mentioned them because if you think about it, in an academic setting, you don't put preschoolers with sixth graders or sixth graders with senior citizens, because all of them in their growth process and in their evolutionary process are growing at different rates. And because of that, they need to be talked to and connected with on the level that they're on at the time. I think this is the reason why it's so important for there to be training for our ministerial leaders. Ministerial leadership they must have training, because if you think about it, I am a senior pastor. I am not as effective with teenagers as my youth pastor.
Yeah.
Some of the lingo, some of the language that we've reached an age where we can be relative to our young people, but after a point in a time, it comes across as us being corny.
Yeah.
We're being corny. because there's certain terminology I can't use without people saying, "Oh, come on, Pastor. That's out of your, that's out of your realm." I think that we have to look at that. We have to really envision. I thought about what you said with the Generation Z. Think about this. With the Generation Z, they are a group of people born after 1996 who primarily do not know the world without a smartphone. They don't know the world without a smartphone. That's what they've always known. And so as a result of that, their most faithful ally is their phone. They do everything on that phone. The best way for us to reach them, we must engage them along the lines of where their love is. If that is their love, if that is their lifestyle, that they spend 90+% of the time on it, let's engage them, let's connect with them there. And then through that process, let's get to discussing purpose and potential.
One of our challenges as African Americans in church is that we appreciate the nurture and the care and the protection of our children, but we're not as involved in the education of our children. That's both secular and sacred. But when you look at scriptures, God was extremely intentional when Moses wrote in Deuteronomy telling them how to discuss the scriptures with their children from their rising to their laying down, etc. And when you look at Judaism, you see their children are brought up in Torah, and they become sons of commandments. Then they became sons of Mishnah and Talmud, and they knew the word growing up. They have their bar mitzvah. We see Jesus in the temple at 12. That was intentional to let us understand his educational process. Then we only hear, the next time we hear from him is 30. At the age of 30, now he's old enough to be a teaching rabbi in the synagogue. And so now we see the scriptures saying, raise up a child, train up a child in the way that they should go. And so I think that not only must we engage our young people in technology, but we've got to engage them in curriculum.
Uh-huh.
We've got to discuss the faith with them in narrative form. But not then, you start off with narrative form, and then you get, as they grow older, then we get into more of the line upon line principles. And I think that this is an opportunity during this time also for pastors to take a step back, church leaders to take a step back. Yes, connect with our younger people, but I think also, man, we've got to write some curriculums. And here's the problem, Remus. Here's the problem, man. Most of the curriculums that are written from Nav Press and everybody else promotes racial superiority.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we teach that to our children, and we then perpetuate something that is oppressive, and then in their adult life we're trying to get it out of them, but we're not being intentional to biblical integrity, to African pride that is present in the scriptures. And I think that we've got to pay attention to that. What's your thoughts, man?
Man, listen, you said a mouthful, because here's the truth. The truth is, even with our children, from the educational perspective, in most cases, what they're getting does not deal with their cultural underpinnings. It doesn't help them at all. When you mentioned, the Jewish bar mitzvah, when I thought about that, the primary principle there that people miss in many cases is that marks the coming of age.
That's right.
It marks the coming of age. In other words, it marks the time where a boy is considered a man. And from that day forward, his father will look upon him like the responsibilities and accountabilities that you have to bring are a result of you being a man. At what point do we teach and train our children from a spiritual perspective about the coming of spiritual age? You know, we don't touch on that. We don't tap into that. We don't. In most cases, it's because we've looked for them to learn by osmosis. Because they come to the church, they ought to be getting something. But the teaching is not clear. The teaching is at best nebulous. The people are confused about really what their place is, what their purpose is. And I think that that's so vitally important. The position, the plight, and the place of every single believer. You know, Dana, the zeitgeist or the spirit of this age is a spirit of information. This is information technology. That's the spirit of this age. And so it's not do as I say. You know, it's not that old school thinking.
Yeah.
Because our children call us on that all the time. And not only is it a spirit of information technology. I mean, think about the George Floyds. Think about, the Jacob Blakes. Think about these situations and think about if there had not been smartphones, we would not know about this. It would simply be something that was going through the rumor mill. But what I'm getting at is because it's a new day and a new time, a lot of our young people that are coming of age feel now that they have been done a grave disservice because we have not prepared them for this moment. We have not prepared them for this moment, not educationally, not spiritually, not physically, or not socioeconomically. And I think that that's one of the things that we're seeing more and more that's causing the church such a great tension, because many of our young people are going around the church to do the things now that they want to do to become successful. And many of them are becoming successful in terms of their career pursuits and not even acknowledging the fact that the church had anything to do with it. Why? Because we've been so silent. Dana, this is a time that we've got to become more militant about what we're doing. I don't believe that the political arrangement in our country is the answer. I believe that Jesus Christ is still the answer. But I do believe that the political spectrum of things has to be a means whereby we inform our young people. I mean, think about it. 197 judges have been brought on the courts since Donald Trump has been the president. One of them is Hispanic. 0 of them are African American. When you talk about appeals court justices, you're talking about 3 men or women or people that are in a room that have the ability to turn back sentences and turn them around. That's not happening now because there's such a right-wing move toward getting these people in. I don't want to be political, but there's no way that we cannot be somewhat political in a day and a time whereby ratio and proportion, our young people, our young men especially, and women, are dying senselessly. And the church is not responding. The church is not truly responding. We have to have a response because we have a pulpit. We have a platform that we can reach multitudes of people. How are we using that? Our young people are seeing this. I've got 4 sons that I've raised, 4 black boys that I've raised that range in age from 37 down to 24. I've got an attorney. I've got a physician. I have, a preacher, a minister, my young adult pastor. And then I have a young man that's in administration, in hospital administration. We have dialogues like this all the time. And their question is, Dad, what is the church really doing? You know, I'm a part of the Fountain of Praise because you're my dad and because I see some of the principles that you and Mom are trying to lay out. But if I looked away from that, how many other churches could I see or am I looking at that are really seeking or attempting to address the social, economic, political and spiritual ills that we're facing. One more thing, and then I'll let you respond to this again. It reminds me of scripture because, you know, when you think about the prophets didn't just speak to our spiritual side. They spoke to the socioeconomic side, the moral side. And remember in Isaiah 59, when Isaiah said, and judgment is turned away backwards, and justice standeth afar off, because truth is fallen in the streets, and equity cannot enter. This is what Isaiah was saying over 5,000 years ago, that we see that today. We see truth falling in the streets, judgment turned away backwards, justice standing afar off. Out of the people such as George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and Sandra Bland and Stephen Clark and Botham Jean and Philando Castile. Out of these people, the Jacob Blake as of late, Michael Brown, out of these people, where have we seen justice? And our young people are asking that question, and then they're looking at us as leaders in the community, as voices in the community, as prophets in the community. And they're saying, what are you doing? What are you guys doing in a unified fashion to see to it that these things are changed? That's where my concern is, especially for our youth today.
Yeah. And you know, and I agree, Pastor. We have the dominant, preeminent part of Christ being our answer, but we do have to be involved in the political aspect of things, and we have to speak to the social ills of our society and our times. We have to represent the voices of the people that we pastor. And, you know, normally, historically, the church has been able to move things due to the number of people gathering physically, and we could impact voting, and we could bring about the numbers for protests. Now, with the social distancing, our impact has become somewhat a little limited here, but we have a voice and we have a platform. And I know I use my voice and my platform. I know you do the same. But when it comes to looking at the issue of social ills and social injustice, uh, we've had protest after protest and riot after riot, and nonetheless, we then have a Jacob Blake who shot 7 times in the back, close point blank, and you know his grandfather, Reverend Jacob Blake Sr., uh, led the fight for fair housing in Evanston, and you know those are our neck of the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, in the 1960s and the 70s, and he led the Ebenezer AME church organization. He organized marches following the assassination of Dr. King that eventually led to the Evanston City Council members to ban racial discrimination in housing. This was his grandson who got shot down in the back. And yes, you know, but here's the deal. We've had riots and protests, and yet this still happens. And then yet you have Kyle Rittenhouse, the white boy who is the aspiring police officer that takes the law in his own hands at the age of 17, and he shoots 3 people, kills 2, shoots 1 in the head, 1 in the chest, and then 1 in the arms. And he walks down the street, and videos are showing it. He's got a rifle, and they just passing him by and throwing him drinks, cold water and Gatorade. And you know, if a black man would have had You look at Tamir Rice. He had a play toy at 12, and they shot him dead because it looked like he had a fire. This white boy, 17 years old. So we know that justice is not prevailing, and we know that the riots are causing some things to happen, but they're not causing things to happen fast enough and with a deeper impact. So I believe, though, Doc, that when it comes to really making the kind of changes, if we want to see them here in America with Black people, it's going to have to be economically driven. Uh, it's like Rosa Parks. When they feel the economics, they listen to the cries. And I believe that we're going to have some type of models. And I believe it's not going to be, it has to be segmented models. What I mean by that is models per cities. It's not going to be a national where everybody's going to do. We're not going to have another civil rights movement. But if we can develop segmented models in the Black community that impact the economics of our country, but yet creates more economic synergy for Black people, I believe that we can do some things. And people know that uh, economic uh, economics is the key. That's why they burned down the Black Wall Street. That's why
Also,
uh,
yeah.
Garvey was put in prison on trumped up charges, because we know that, if we build our economics. So I believe that the church needs to be involved in training our people economically, because we have the greatest numbers of lay people coming to our organizations, our churches, and I believe that we have to be involved in that. But that means, though, we got to change the mind of the preacher, period. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this, answer a couple of questions. Um, when it comes to the preacher, in the 21st century, I was sharing with you 98% statistics suggest and research suggests that 98% of all clergy of any ethnicity worldwide, globally, has not received any formal theological training, which suggests that we really have a theological and an intellectual gap in Black leadership. Now, after this, and I wish we had more time to flush out all these things, but you know, Black leadership coming out of this pandemic, we're going to have innovative leaders, but we have to have leaders that are from the church, that are informed biblically and theologically. So, Pastor, tell me, what are your thoughts about the theological training, impartation, necessities of our leaders? Because now people are not just turning your neighbor, give them high five, run around church. That's not you. People are listening now for content.
That's right.
So now we're moving into a age of content. Let me hear your thoughts on that.
I think that is going to be tantamount to our continued ability to prosper and grow in this nation as a people. Pastors have to be trained. You know, this day and age, for us to look at people that just feel like God has called me, and then they jump from God's calling into a pulpit, into a pastoral role, that's never been accurate. That's never been accurate, and it's never been healthy. I think that the same way that we look for other careers or people in various careers to have some kind of formal training, that's certainly something that we need among pastors, especially now, because one of the things we have to do is we have to smash some of the old images that have existed in the church. Uh, I have never ever been the person that has felt like that Jesus Christ was white. Okay. Okay. I mean, and that's not a racist perspective. That's simply a biblical perspective because I've studied my Bible and I know that that's just not accurate.
It's not
But
accurate.
now we live in a country where to make claims like that can cause some sense of disturbance or disruption because people feel like that you're becoming too militant. No, I'm not being militant. I look at it this way. If I smash these warped images, now I can help for there to be healthy images and therefore a healthy identity with the people that I pastor, to make them know that self-loathing is wrong. You don't have to loathe yourself because you see yourself as a perpetual slave. I'm not a perpetual slave. I'm a prominent citizen that has the power of God living and residing within me. But that has to be taught. Dana, that has to be taught. It takes men like yourself. And I say this quite often, that we have to understand the value of one another's giftings. We have to respect, regard, and understand the value of one another's giftings. You have the gifting of being able to from an academic perspective, lay things out historically, intellectually, and spiritually. And then most of all, put those together and show a practical application of that. God has given you that gift. Why look over you because you have that gift and that's not the area or the lane that God has called me into? I'm prospering in another lane. And while many times I'm driving on that same road you're on, that's not a lane that I'm staying in such a way that I bring it across as you do. But I can send people to you. I'm talking about universities, colleges, seminaries now, that men of your caliber ought to be over, that you're training our people to know how to love themselves, to respect themselves, to recognize their worth, their wealth. I think that education, academics are very key in what we're to do as we come through this pandemic and we enter into a new segment of society. It's key because the other things to look at, well, let me just back up a little bit and say this as well as that. From a political standpoint, we as pastors must be willing to mobilize our people to get the vote out. Every church, I think every Black church in America ought to be pushing that their people go to the polls to vote. Not only for a national vote, but local, because all politics is really local. We need to be sure that we have people that are protecting our interests. If you think about it right now, under Donald Trump, the group of people, 97% of the people that stick with him, they stick with him because of an agenda that they've carved out. And that agenda they've carved out is an agenda that they say they'll stay with him in spite of the immorality and other problems that he has, simply because there are other things that they think are more significant,
right,
that they want to see happen. And that's why I brought up about the 198 judges a minute ago, because to them, the most significant thing is to have people in the courts that will take care of right to life, that will take care of various other issues like that. I'm the same way in terms of my people. I want them to be informed. And isn't that what we do?
yes,
As pastors, we are informers. Our people need to be informed about mass incarceration, that over 80% of those people mass incarcerated are people of color. Our people ought to be informed about economically the fact that we could represent the 11th largest nation on the face of the earth if you talk about Blacks pulling their resources together, and yet and still our finances are not turned over in our community for 30 days. We should be able to inform our people about what to do if they're stopped by the police officers, how to handle themselves until they can fight another day.
Yeah.
We should be informed about these kind of things. Every Sunday, we have that opportunity. And even more so now, because through virtual preaching and ministry, we're reaching people outside the scope of the people that go to the Rock Church or that go to Fountain of Praise. We're reaching other people that look in. I mean, I catch your broadcast many times, especially on, especially your weekly broadcast. I catch them on many instances and look in because there's great information there. We need to recognize how far our reach really is. And I think when we start to do that, and then, there's another issue that you and I talk about all the time that's close and near to us. When are we going to come together, man? Like Rodney King said, when are we going to all just get along? When are we going to get along? When are we going to come to the place that we recognize that we got to leave ego at the door when we're trying to get some serious issues handled?
That's right.
Man, look, you and I can get together and we can stand before a team of news broadcasters. And where a question comes as it relates to academics or things or theological scholastic discussions, I'm going to easily move back and let Dr. Carson respond to that. That doesn't make me look any less. It shows that I'm using wisdom, exercising wisdom to see to it that we stand together. Think about it this way. With the Hebrew boys, when they went down into Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar had them, and I illustrate this all the time. One of them might have been from 3rd Ward, another might have been from 5th Ward, another from Sunnyside, another from City Gas. But the reality is, when they responded, who cried out? Who responded? The response was, we are not
That's right.
careful to answer you concerning this matter. Our God is able.
That's right.
Who was it? Shadrach? Was it Meshach? Was it Abednego? Which one was it? They were so in tune to one another.
We.
That's
right.
We don't have a we today,
yeah.
Dana. Our biggest problem is the lack of a we. It's I, me, and mine. And that is destroying our ability and potential to reach this nation in a unified way.
Yeah, and I agree. And, we've got to overturn or die trying to overturn the impact, the intergenerational impacts of Willie Lynch.
Yes, sir.
And, we've got to be able to come together. I just purchased the Southwestern Theological Campus here in Houston.
That's a good thing, brother.
And we're going to do a Kingdom Theological Seminary, and we hope to be able to train local pastors, their local ministers, and their church leaders, staff. Try to share with them what we have gleaned and learned over 35 years in full-time ministry. I remember the first time I met you in Austin.
Sure did. I
Rest-
remember at dinner. We went out to dinner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me say to you, let me just interject this really quick. Brother, kudos to you. And there's no way I can let you know how that warms my heart, because I finished my MDiv in biblical languages right there on that campus. Listen, on that campus, in the rotunda and in the preacher's room up front, Dr. Ralph Douglas West and the Church Without Walls dedicated the rotunda. Fountain of Praise, my wife and myself, we dedicated the preacher's rooms up in the front. When they came to dedicate that church to Southwestern Theological Seminary, Ralph and I were marginalized. And we're the only ones that gave substantial amounts of money to make that happen. I'm saying that to you because I want to sow a seed into what you're doing. And let me know when you guys are going in, when you guys are doing your celebration, because I want our church to sow a seed. That's good ground. And now it's got good leadership, and it's got a gardener that knows how to fertilize that ground. Man, I want to sow into that. But see, brother, I believe in that. I believe that we should let brotherly love continue, and we should work together.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Listen, I have a couple of questions I gotta let us answer before we get off of here so I don't get shot. Listen, here's the question, first question. As the March on Washington takes place today, what insights can you provide regarding this movement of Black Lives Matter and young activists in the wake of Jacob Blake being shot 7 times in the back? Go ahead. I'm going to let you address that.
I would say that perseverance, persistency, and continuation are the three words that come to me immediately. We know that the arc of justice bends, and we know that it bends in the direction of change. And so we have got to believe that this new movement that is arising is going to be effective. I think, though, the important thing is to not let people demonize what Black Lives Matter is doing, not to allow people to demonize what protesters are doing, but to recognize that this is all necessary. You know, one of the things I think about is that in most cases, many white people think that they're not racist because they don't have a conscious sense of rage and anger toward people of other ethnicities. They don't understand the little indignities that promote systemic racism, such as you go to a place you go to your doctor's office, you get on an elevator, and there's somebody on that elevator that sees you get on by yourself with them, and either they get off or they go back into the corner as if they're fearful. Why are you fearful of me when I've never been in a position where I've done things to you that would suggest some sense of hurt and harm? Little indignities, such as school teachers telling my son that's a doctor now, telling him in the 6th grade that he's a good C student, and if he works really, really, really hard, he could be a good foreman in a warehouse.
Yeah.
Little indignities.
Yeah.
These kind of things. So I think that with the Jacob Blake situation, the deeper story here is not just the fact that they shot this man in the back 7 times, but they did it in the presence of his 3 young children.
Yeah.
To instill fear in these children for the rest of their lives. We have to teach what it means to stand strong in the face of injustice, and whatever the consequences are, oh well.
That's right. You know, I agree wholeheartedly. And so young people, I would say that it is your duty to stand up for justice. You have to do it in a very disciplined way to make sure that your good is not spoken evil of. And
Right.
so you need to formulate some watch groups within your protest to watch to make sure that others are not coming in causing disturbances to cast a dark shade over what you're doing, because oftentimes a lot of people that are looting and burning, they're not even with the protesters. Some of them are actually racists that's trying to create that impression publicly. So I would then say, so it's your duty, be diligent and disciplined and diligent. Okay, so here's the next question. Uh, what role does the church play in Black Lives Matter movement without compromising the kingdom agenda of Matthew 28:19? Um, I would just say right off, because it's a shorter answer to me. When the Bible tells us to go make disciples of all nations, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter movement is definitely within the nations. And so minister to the Black Lives Matter movement and to help uh, promote and perpetuate their cause of social justice is not a violation of going into all the world and making disciples. What would you say on that,
I
Doc?
would say basically the same, but I think that it's to me somewhat hypocritical that every time we think about Black Lives Matter, people want to make it this left wing conspiracy group of people that are wreaking havoc on our nation, when in fact the Black Lives Matter movement is essential to making sure we keep dialogue, healthy dialogue going in this nation, to let people know that we feel that we've been done a grave disservice. How long do we have to exist in America? I think Doc Rivers said it best the other night when he said, for all these years, we've loved our country, and yet our country has never loved us back the way that they should. It doesn't matter what level you climb to. Think about it this way. The average white pastor doesn't have to sit his sons or daughters down in the morning or at night and tell them to be careful when they go out. No. Why should we have to do that? Why should we have to do that? I think, and then when you look at what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with this young 17-year-old boy. Now, he's not Black Lives Matter. He comes from nowhere. They give him water and food, and he kills 2 people, shoots 3. But you hear little or no talk about that. No conversation about it. You cannot say there's not a double standard, and we cannot continue to whine and cry. We have to continue, as Black Lives Matter is doing, to push the agenda of equality.
Yeah, because, you've seen the president's block, executive block, make it seem like when we say Black Lives Matter, we are by default saying other lives do not matter. But that's not what is being said. We're saying in a world where it seems like all other lives matter, we just want to let you know our lives matter as well. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is also not just Black people involved in that movement. You have non-Blacks, and now you have non-Americans globally involved in that movement. Now, I think that it is a disgrace to think that the world could be compassionate enough to join in to try to lift up a voice to demand social justice for all people, and especially here, Black lives, and then the church to feel like it's taboo, it's not God, we shouldn't be involved in that. That lets you know, once again, my book, The 5 Watersheds of History and Theology, a fresh look at 21st century Christianity in light of cultural distortions. That lets you know that Romanization, Europeanization, colonization, Westernization, and Americanization of the gospel has controlled the minds of churches, church leaders, church people, where it makes the church afraid to walk and minister in compassion to a race of people, our people, who are being discriminated against. If Jesus was here, I believe Jesus would be walking right down the streets with the Black Lives Matter people, doing miracles and healings, and letting them stone the little white boy with the rifle.
I agree on that 100%, or at least tap him up a little bit. The truth is, it's like one of my fire chiefs said that goes to church here. Over in our neighborhood, some houses was on fire, and he came out, he was talking about it, and they said to him, well, you know what? Well, that house over there is on fire, but it's a whole bunch of houses over here. He said, well, I'm not concerned about the other houses right now. I'm concerned about the one that's on fire. That's what Black Lives Matter is saying. They're concerned about the house that's burning up as a result of racism, as a result of injustice, as a result of inequality. That's what they're concerned about. And rightfully they should be. They should be.
And Remus, here is the tragedy. We just happened to find out about Jacob Blake. The reality is that's happening nonstop every day all over our country.
All over our country.
Able to capture it yet. And so, this is widespread. Well, listen, man, I'm gonna let you give some words of encouragement and shout out for us, and then because our time we went over, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But
let me say this to you, man. I appreciate the fact that we could get together and rap like this. People do need to know that this isn't the only time me and you rap. We talk on an ongoing basis, And I really appreciate the dialogue conversation we have. While we don't agree on everything, I think that that's wonderful because we can put our thoughts together and meld together our vision and do great things for kingdom. And I think that's what it's all about. The day that two people agree on everything, it shows that one of them is unnecessary. One of them is certainly unnecessary. But I love the fact that what you're doing, God is using you in a mighty way. Your scholastic ability, your vision, your broad scope of the way ministry should be, and the way you engaging people and reach out to other pastors to try to engage them. I think it's wonderful, and I thank God for not only your friendship but your collegiateship. I thank you for being on that same page with you. And let me say to all of those listening and watching, let us continue to fight this good fight of faith, both in the spiritual realm and in the practical realm. Let's be involved. Let's be engaged. Let's recognize that we need to leave a great legacy for our children coming along. And that means that we want them to have the best of the best. And the only way that can happen is that we have to lift ourselves up socioeconomically and politically. And that happens through our spiritual incentive. Our spirit man is what really fuels that. It's the part of us that he says, he that is able to do exceeding greater above all that you could ever ask or think. You know, that's what I think, according to that power that's at work in us. That power is at work in us. But Dana, we have to train the young people that we have to learn how to utilize that power effectively. And I think that's what you've been set on this wall to do. That's what I've been set on this wall to do. And let's continue to do it, man, heartily unto the Lord with all our might.
Okay, but thank you, man. I love you so much. You know, we'll holler at you a little later. Thank you for coming on Relevant Pulpits. It's been a joy. And, you know, we'll do it again. Love you, bro.
Bless you, man. Hope I said something, man, that was helpful, man. Don't fire me. Remember me next time.
Oh, man.
Bless you, brother.
God bless, man. Listen, I know you enjoyed. We didn't get a chance to get to all the questions because we got to chopping it up. And that's what we do on Relevant Pulpits. We let you hear us chop it up, and we then try to get to your questions. But I want you to not to forget to support us now. We need you to support. We come on 7 days a week, and I have a staff engaged and hired to help us be able to offer ministry to you 7 days a week. Next week on Relevant Pulpits, I'm going to have Bishop Joseph Walker. He's going to be with me next week. And then the week after that, I think I'm going to have Bishop Richard White, Mr. Clean. And then the week after that, I'm going to have Bishop Daryl Hines. So we got a lot of powerful, relevant pulpits coming to you. But I want you to support today and help us to continue to be able to do what it is we do. They'll rebroadcast this on tonight for those of you that may have gotten a late start. And then also join me tomorrow night, 9 o'clock Central Standard Time for the Kingdom Voice Live. And if you don't have a place to worship on Sunday morning, then join us at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. 10 a.m. Of course, all of our services are online right now, but join us. Amen. Get up, go to church, put your clothes on, then sit there and listen and and then engage, stand up, have a little praise, engage your, experience worship. 10 a.m. And then if you need prayer at 6 p.m., we have our Signs and Wonder service where we will be praying for you and believing God to touch you. And I'm dealing with on Sunday nights how to handle transitions. So I believe that it will bless you. Well, I love you. Until next time, God bless you. The Lord be with you, keep you, and make his face shine upon you, give you peace. In Jesus' name, shalom. Bye-bye.